Lovely. My name is Amy Huggins, and I will be our service leader for today. We are a lay-led community strengthened and enriched by our weaving together the volunteer contributions of our members and friends. Thank you to everyone who participates in our beloved community. Important values we hold close are individual freedom of belief and diversity. We seek to promote a sense of community meant to enrich your spirit. Whoever you are, wherever you've come from, whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey is right now, know that you are welcome here. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the Squamish Coast Salish Native peoples. The Puyallup and Muckleshoot people have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so even today. We recognize that this land acknowledgement is one small step towards true allyship, and we commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of the Indigenous people of this land and beyond. The Unitarian Universalist Ministers Service Team coordinated today's service. Catherine Sullivan, thank you, is our tech support, and we're honored to welcome Reverend Colleen Squires from All Souls Community Church of West Michigan for today's service. The chat function will be turned on only during joys and concerns. It'll be closed at all other times. You can still reach out directly to Catherine if you have tech issues. Now, please settle in. I invite you to take a wide inhale and even longer, deep exhale to relax into this moment in your own body. I invite you to set aside your thoughts and experiences of all that happened this long morning before that you arrived here, and allow yourself to settle in to the presence, to the spirit, to the life in fellowship. Let's just take another moment, breathing in silence. Ted and Vicky, please light our chalice.
I light this chalice.
Invoking the Past, Present, and Future by Katie Romano Griffin. Come, let us enter the space of hope and community. Come, let us enter this space with our sorrows, our joys, our passion, and compassion. Come, let us enter this space with the stories of our ancestors, for their strength and wisdom beats in our hearts. Come into this space, present to the beloved companions who move beside us. Come into this space, mindful that together we are building a future for other generations. Come into this space and let us worship.
I am delighted to welcome back the Reverend Colleen Squires of the All Souls Community Church in Grand Rapids. Colleen last spoke to us last winter when her topic was prepared to be embarrassed. And I am so excited that she's back again today. Colleen grew up in a Catholic family in New Jersey and moved to Boston, where she met her wife, Linda, and found the Unitarian Universalist Church. After a time, she was called to the ministry and attended seminary. And just as Colleen was completing her seminary training, All Souls, then 10 years old, was ready to call its first minister. I am proud to have led the Ministerial Search Committee. They succeeded in calling Colleen to All Souls, even though she was not completely sure where Michigan was. Since then, Colleen and All Souls have grown and prospered. I'm grateful that Colleen was able to make time in her schedule to return to VIUF. Today, she'll be talking to us on showing up for your own life. And thank you, Colleen.
Thank you, Kate. It's great to be here. It's nice to be in worship with you. I miss it, and it's so lovely to be back with you all. So the call to worship this morning actually comes from a book, The Curious Case of Benjamin Buttons, and it's towards the end of the book that Benjamin says this. For what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my case, too early, to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Stop whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There's no rules to this thing. You can make the best of your own life or the worst of it. I hope you make the best of it. And I hope that you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things that you have never felt before. I hope you meet people with different points of view. I hope you live a life that you are proud of. And if you find that you're not, I hope you have the courage to start all over again. And now we'll be singing our first hymn, number 357, Bright Morning Star.
Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Day is a breaking in my soul. Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? Day is a breaking in my soul. They are sowing seeds of gladness. They are sowing seeds of gladness. They are sowing seeds of gladness. Day is a breaking in my soul. Oh, where are our dear fathers? Oh, where are our dear fathers? Oh, where are our dear fathers?
I Am Human, a book on empathy. I was born a miracle, one of billions, but unique. I am human. I'm always learning. I am finding my way and choosing my path on this incredible journey. I have big dreams. I see possibility. I have endless curiosity. I make discoveries. I have feelings of wonder. I am amazed by nature. I have a playful side. I find joy and friendship. I am human. But being human means that I am not perfect. I make mistakes. I can hurt others with my words, my actions, and even my silence. I can be hurt too. I can be fearful of things I don't understand and timid to try something new. I have a heavy heart when I feel sadness. I am human. But then I remind myself that because I am human, I can make choices. I can move forward. A poor choice can become a better choice with thoughtfulness. A bad day can become a great day with kindness. I can act with compassion and lend a helping hand. I can treat others with equality and be fair. I can choose not to fight, but instead to listen and find common ground. I can say, I'm sorry, and ask for forgiveness. I am human, one of billions, but unique. I am not alone. I am connected to my friends, to my family, to my world. We are all humans together. And I will keep trying to be the best version of me. I am full of hope. I am human. The end.
Hey, Kate, you're muted.
Authenticity is defined by Brené Brown. Authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we are supposed to be and embracing who we are. Choosing authenticity means cultivating the courage to be imperfect, to set boundaries, and to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Exercising the compassion that comes from knowing that we are all made of strength and struggle, and nurturing the connection and sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe we are strong enough. Authenticity demands wholehearted living and loving, even when it's hard, even when we are wrestling with the shame and fear of not being good enough, and especially when the joy is so intense that we are afraid to let ourselves feel it. Mindfully practicing authenticity during our most soul-searching struggles is how we invite grace, joy, and gratitude into our lives. In my research, I found the core of authenticity is the courage to be imperfect, vulnerable, and to set boundaries. For all of us who try to put this definition into practice on a daily basis, I would argue that authenticity requires almost constant vigilance and awareness about the connections between our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It also means staying mindful about our intentions. Real authenticity actually requires major self-monitoring. In fact, setting boundaries is, by definition, self-monitoring. It is thinking about what you are sharing, why you are sharing it, and with whom you should be sharing it. This is from The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown.
Reverend Squires, you're muted.
Okay, how's that?
It's
Can you hear
perfect.
me?
Yes,
Okay,
I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So like I was saying, it's really wonderful to be here. So thank you for inviting me. So I want to start talking about Robin DiAngelo, and she is the author of the book White Fragility, why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. And Robin, if you remember, because you're in that part of the country, she was a featured speaker at our General Assembly when it was held right near you in Spokane, Washington, just a few years ago. Many UUs around the country read her book. But I did not recommend DiAngelo's book to my congregation. Instead, I recommended Dr. Crystal Fleming's book, How to Be Less Stupid About Race. Now you may wonder why I did that. Well, first, both books are published by Beacon Press, our Unitarian Universalist publishing company. So I felt that both of them were equally connected to our faith. But the more important reason was I wanted to practice what I preach. I preach, or I believe, we need to change the lens. We need to change the lens on how we see things in the world. As a predominantly white denomination, we tend to lift up white authors over African-American authors. And when it comes to conversations around and about race, our logic or reason tells us that we would just simply learn so much more if we lifted up voices of those who are at the center of this issue. History will also tell us that we generally do the exact opposite, that we basically are consistently lifting up the wealthy or the white voices, those in power. So I suggested Dr. Fleming's book because she is African-American, she is a scholar, and she is an author. And a number of folks here in the congregation joined me in reading the book. Now let me have a little confession with you. I will have to openly admit that the book really took me way out of my comfort zone. I struggled with the book, particularly around her assessment of US politics, and in particular, her opinion of our former president, President Barack Obama. Her lens was different. And I learned such a great deal from reading her book. And I sincerely appreciate being pushed, I mean, really pushed differently and more critically about some of my deeply held beliefs or understandings of how I see the world as a white person. So using her lens to see the world through her eyes. After reading her book, many in the congregation asked me to tell them what are the next steps and what is the next book we should be reading. And here is the answer I gave. As Unitarian Universalists, we in large part like to read books. In fact, I'll say we love to read books to educate ourselves on issues. We read them to learn in depth about a problem or an issue, and then to learn how to approach it for solutions with our own critical eye, so that we can move forward in a direction that makes the most sense to us, and also trying to keep the greater good in all of what we do. But on this issue of race, on this issue of racism and systemic racism, and I'll even say on this issue of white supremacy culture, we have read a lot of books, and I mean a lot. We want to even read more books on the topic, but at some point, and here's the critical message, at some point we need to stop reading and start doing. And the doing is about becoming anti-racist, to actively work against racism. And that ultimately is the takeaway message from Dr. Fleming's book, How to Be Less Stupid About Race. See, it's no longer just simply about being non-racist person, but it's more about moving over to a more higher level and becoming an anti-racist person. So let me give you an example. Using a racial slur. Now this is interesting. I just met with a high school youth group and they talked about a teacher using a racial slur. Well, let's talk about us using a racial slur, us. This is level 1. Never use a racial slur, never. That's level 1. That's our baseline. That's 0.0 on the graph or the scale. We don't ever get credit for not using one because that's the bare minimum of human decency, not to use one. You don't get extra points. That is actually our starting point. That is what a non-racist behavior looks like. So to be non-racist is not some great achievement. There's no pride in a great accomplishment because it's the baseline. We need to up our game and move up from there. But what about when we hear a racial slur spoken by another person? For many of us, our approach is to ignore it or deliberately not engage in it or even pretend like it just didn't happen. We think by saying nothing, we are taking the safer route for ourselves in particular. And when we do that, we are choosing to shrink and hide. Yet I firmly believe, and I mean this at a core level of my beliefs, I believe our ignoring that kind of stuff or pretending that it didn't happen eats away at us. It just eats away at us. We carry it with us and it causes us shame. It causes us shame. Brene Brown has said, if we trade our authenticity for safety, we may experience emotions like anxiety and depression and even grief. So our next right step is whenever we hear a racial slur being used, is to shut it down. Just shut that stuff down. No matter how scary it might be or how alone we might feel, we just need to shut it down. We have to find a way to be courageous, to find that courage within ourselves to say, hey, that's not okay, or not in my presence. That's never going to be okay with me. And that, my friends, is what I mean by showing up for your own life. That is what showing up for your own life looks like. And when you do that, it is incredibly empowering. And sure, it's scary at times, but I can tell you it feels so, so good. This is the kind of courage that Brene Brown is describing, not in just one book, but actually in all of her books. This is her message, to show up. Brown says that courage starts with showing up and letting yourself be seen. It is embracing and exposing your authentic self to the world. And she says that that authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every single day, all day long. It's about the choice we are making to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen by others. and our willingness to show up changes us. It changes us. It makes us a little bit braver every single time we do it. Some folks tell me it's hard to hear sermons about racial justice issues. I hear that a lot. And I think to myself, how is that any different than hearing a sermon about shame? I think hearing a sermon about shame would be more difficult. Now, I mentioned shame because in my 9 years here with this congregation, which is approximately 337 sermons, but who's counting? The shame sermon was by far the #1 sermon in terms of notes of appreciation and thank you and gratitude for preaching it, followed by several personal confessions or conversations about people needing to share that shame moment with me. It was very powerful. So I just want to say that whether the sermon is about healing from the hurts from our own broken hearts, or the brokenness of the world, or the sermon is about facing anguish from our childhood, or the injustices in our neighborhoods, whether the sermon is about our individual lives or the current social justice issue of the day, the message is the same. When we choose to be seen, when we choose to show up, to be vulnerable, and ultimately brave, our lives get better. While we tend to resist all of this out of fear, our lives actually get better when we risk being vulnerable. Our lives get better when we start showing up and letting others see ourselves, be seen for who we are, our authentic self. It's about risking courage. It's about being brave. So whether the message is about risking telling someone to shut up about racism, or even a greater risk to tell somebody you love them, a greater risk to tell somebody you love them, they are both about having the courage to be honest and be seen for who you are. Brown says that owning your story can be hard, but not nearly as hard as spending our lives running from them. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love or belonging or joy. All three, love, belonging, and joy, are experiences that actually, according to Brown, make us the most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the depths will we discover the infinite heights of love, belonging, and joy. So let me end my sermon this morning by using Brene Brown's closing statement from a recent talk she gave on Netflix entitled Vulnerability. Vulnerability is hard, she says, and it's scary and it feels dangerous, but it's not as hard and as scary and as dangerous as getting to the end of your life and having to ask yourself, what if I had showed up? What if I said, I love you first? So show up, be seen, answer the call to courage, because you are worth it. You are worth being brave. Show up for your own life. Amen.
Let's take a few moments to reflect on this powerful message. I invite you to take another deep breath in and out of what might have felt scary. As a caring community, we set aside time to share our joys and concerns from our lives as we speak really from our own hearts. This is a time to honor the common humanity and the sacred spirit within each one of us. Catherine will call on individuals to share their joy or concern. Please use the raise hand function through Zoom. It can be found at the bottom of your screen in reactions. You can also physically raise your hand to be called on. Please remember to unmute yourself before speaking. Catherine, please stop recording now. And let's just take a moment of silence to prepare our hearts for today's joys and concerns.